Well, many of you probably know the history of the mercenaries for hire by the name of Blackwater, the hired guns the U.S. government paid to do its dirty work in Iraq and other hotspots around the world. They were responsible for some horrible things like the Nisour Square massacre in Baghdad, where Blackwater shot and killed 17 civilians. Many of us were wondering, how are they able to operate unfettered without laws? Many of us wondered if Blackwater is operating today, and if so, are they operating in Ukraine? Well, Redacted News can confirm that they are, in fact, operating in Ukraine, but not in the way that we thought. Redacted's own Dan Cohen has the story. Dan, welcome to the show. Good to see you. So, not in the way that we thought. Can you give us some context here?
Yeah, Clayton. So U.S. government contracts show that the Pentagon actually contracted Academy Training Center, which is part of the company formerly known as Blackwater, which underwent a series of rebrands following the Nisour Square massacre and all of the fallout from that. They contracted Blackwater, essentially the Academy Training Center, for $3.2 million to do a media literacy training series in Ukraine. Now, what exactly does that mean? It's not clear. But if we look at the solicitation for this contract, it was to provide so-called targeted products in Ukraine to achieve classified objectives.
What is
So
it?
there's a lot of
What does that mean? That's like Washington speak, if I've ever heard it. Targeted
exactly.
products.
This whole thing raises more questions than answers. Like, what are special forces interested in media literacy for, and why do they contract it out? Maybe for secrecy, maybe because everything is done that way in Washington. It's always contracted out, but there's not a lot of clarity here. So, um, you know, who did Blackwater, who did Academy teach media, so-called media literacy to in Ukraine? I mean, let's be clear, media literacy, that sounds like a nice euphemism for, wartime military psychological operations. I think it's safe to assume it's something along those lines, rather than, teaching them how to read the New York Times and the Washington Post every day. So, this is military grade information warfare. And, that's, of course, not about getting us the truth or teaching Ukrainian journalists how to report. This is about accomplishing military objectives. So, I mean, one of the questions that comes to mind for me is, who were they training? Were these any of the neo-Nazi battalions? Was this the Azov battalion or Idar or Tornado? Any of those ultra-fascistic military wings of the Ukrainian military that are operating today? And I mean, when you look at the high quality propaganda that Azov has put out throughout this whole war, especially since the Russian invasion, which is really high grade, you have to wonder who trained them for that. It's not like they just figured it out. So that's what I would suspect, but who knows? Maybe this is something more mundane. We really just don't know, but certainly it's not, teaching them the basics of how to write a newspaper article.
So, Dan, what do you think that these contracts mean? And are these readily available? Like, we're able to go on every afternoon and look at what, the DOD is spending and these different contracts, whether it's with Boeing. Every afternoon they publish, I think at around 5 in the afternoon. Are these contracts available for anyone to go and find and see?
Well, what's kind of remarkable is this is not on the regular federal register on sam.gov. This was only available on GovTribe, which requires a subscription and, of course, some sleuthing to even find in the first place. So it's sort of another layer of secrecy in terms of what these contracts actually are, because they use so many euphemisms and kind of, government speak and levels of classification. It's kind of anyone's guess. I mean, it could be something totally mundane, like just really is media literacy training if we take it at its face. But I suspect that it's something more, that this is actually, military grade information warfare that they're teaching to elements of the Ukrainian military. I mean, you have Special Operations Command involved in teaching so-called media literacy. It's hard to believe that it's not a more serious kind of operation. And this is, of course, back in 2018 when this started, as the Ukrainian military is being kind of beefed up by the U.S. military. It's really a project of the Pentagon. So, were they training them to produce slick propaganda, like all the propaganda that we saw from the Azov battalion over the last year?
Can you give us an example?
High level.
Let's talk about some of that. Maybe our audience might not be familiar with some of this psychological ops specifically. Maybe you can talk about that, but also some of the slick PR, because that's where my mind went. That they had some bad PR in Iraq, right? Blackwater. So they know a thing or two about how to maybe hide certain nefarious elements of their own tribe. Let's just talk about the psychological ops piece of this, and then what maybe they were doing in this training that you think of.
Well, I mean, when you think about the psychological operations that we've seen over the last year in particular, I mean, there are countless just straight up lies. I mean, everyone remembers the ghost of Kiev. That was Adam Kinzinger's favorite. He still thinks to this day is real, that right. That fighter, the mythical fighter jet that took out so many Russians, but actually was completely fake, and Kinzinger insisted was actually real. I mean, there are so many. There were video games that were portrayed as real combat. There was the Snake Island incident, where the FU Russian warship that was actually faked, and the sailors were given the Hero of Ukraine award because they resisted and then were killed by Russia but turned up alive. So could be any of those. In terms of the slick propaganda, I mean, before the Battle of Mariupol, I think, or even, and during, and even since, but there has been an incredible amount of really high quality professional propaganda from, in particular, the Azov battalion. If you look at its Telegram channel, and that's where it distributes most of it, I mean, this is not just soldiers, on the front lines or whatever with their phone and they're scared taking a shaky video. This is high level, high quality production, really professional level. So that's not by accident. So I wonder if that's what this so-called media literacy training series was really about, something along those lines.
Do we know how big Blackwater, I mean, I just call them Blackwater. Whoever knows what name they're under this week. They've changed their name so many times, just going through the laundry list of names. But do we know how big this organization is today?
I don't know. There's so little reporting about Blackwater and what it's actually up to today. Everything's about the Wagner Group and what they're doing. But, we don't really see much reporting these days about Blackwater or Academy or, whatever the rebrand is. There's just not much talk about it in U.S. media anymore.
And these are former special operations, former special ops forces?
Yeah, exactly. Those are former special ops guys who go to be private contractors to be, deployed anywhere around the world. And when they're contracted by Special Operations Command of the Pentagon, I mean, that's anywhere. The whole world is a battlefield, and it's in total secrecy. So who knows? They could, Yemen, Afghanistan, Iraq. I mean, obviously, Ukraine. I mean, anywhere. I think that the Pentagon wants it, where they're fighting some kind of shadow war. They could be operating.
It's amazing. So millions of dollars, taxpayer dollars that we don't have answers for, going to fund a group that's notorious and ended up being prosecuted for essentially for war crimes. But our tax dollars are going to support this. Nothing's surprising anymore. Dan, we really appreciate it. Thanks so much for joining us on this story.
Thanks a lot, Clayton.
Thanks so much, Dan. And, it's so funny. So in the chat just saying, who was in the chat just saying this? Let me see. Someone just wrote. It just scrolled by. I'm sorry. Someone just said they saw BlackRock announced a number of years ago in a magazine article that they were back. And they said if they remember correctly, I missed that. I don't know if it was like 5-6 years ago that they announced they're back. Like, hey, we committed some war crimes. We know we were prosecuted for it, but we're back, baby. Like, we're back. You want to support us again?
Well, it's interesting, like them teaching like media literacy or whatever, however he phrased it.
Right.
Like I mean, that's like, because I took a in college I took a sociology of the media course. Of course, was like, you know, taught by Goebbels. I mean, like seriously, like how do they get like these like war crime committing mercenaries to be teaching like media literacy? I mean, come on.
Yeah,
come on.
Like Himmler, no. Can you come to lunch with me? No, I got to go to Himmler's class just after lunch.
Well, and technically. Yeah. You know, they're just outside of military peer review, so it's like, is it really a war crime? Because they're not really managed by, like,
Right.
we don't have any control over them.
And if you actually declare war, which we didn't and we don't, so you know these are private contractors funded by the Pentagon. We never declared war. Can they be considered war crimes? I don't know. They were prosecuted as such, and then they were pardoned. Unfortunately. Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.